Okay, this talk begins at the beginning. It begins right at the start of everything, as the universe is slowly coming together and it's becoming what we now know as our planet and our galaxy. It takes us right the way back to the formation of everything, and ultimately it takes us all the way back to the formation of ourselves here on planet Earth. Okay, so hopefully by the end of today everybody in this room will know a little bit more about themselves. Okay, it's as I say, crystal skulls and human heads. It's got a lot to do with crystal skulls, and there's one. The connection to planet Earth will become apparent as the talk progresses, and at this point the book of the same name is available on Amazon, so all dash out, do you click and collect, and 3 days later it comes through the front door. Okay, so please buy the book because it keeps my publisher happy. Okay, we're going to start by asking the question, right, what's the oldest version of us? Right, well, the oldest version of us at the moment is being dug in Czechoslovakia. By us, I mean Homo erectus, because that's essentially what we are, and they are quite old. Now, when I did this and first put this PowerPoint together, it was 34,000 BC. There you go, years old, modern known skulls. I can't even say that. Czech Republic. Now then, they've now then got them that go back to 42,000. So they're getting them older and older as they're going further and further into the big hole, which is what archaeologists do, which is basically what I do for a day job, is order people around in big holes. But they are the oldest version of us. If they were still sort of skin on, as it were, and they were wandering down the street, you would not give them a second glance. They would look very much the same as us. And that really is about the oldest version of us that we've got any remains for. The definition of us really, though, comes from the size of our brains. Some of us have bigger ones than others. I'll come to that in a bit. So the cranial capacity, the bit inside that carries the sort of grey matter, that's what defines humans. And we've got skulls that don't actually look anything like us, but they've still got quite a large capacity. So you could go back a bit further, I mean quite a lot further, with 300,000 BC now into the fossil record. One of the other big differences, though, is that the skulls from the Czech Republic have still got some bits of organic stuff sticking to them. The sort of nasty bits that, was in the cemetery this morning. Those kind of sticky bits are quite useful because we get DNA. We can actually look at who and what that particular individual was. When you go back this far, you're basically looking at stone. You can't get DNA out of stone. So you're running on different criteria really with this. But the brain capacity is really important. File that one away because you're going to need that piece of information further down the line. What I'll do is I'll go through in the same order we do in the book. What about heads? What about skulls? Why did I pick skulls? Well, we'll start with the ancient heads, the ones I've just mentioned. The reason I picked human heads, crystal skulls and human heads, is basically we've all got one. It's something that's familiar to all of us. And it doesn't matter what period of time you go back to, if it's anything to do with us, then chances are it's got a skull, so you can go back. You've only got to go back a few hundred years and they start to look at death maybe in a slightly different way to the way we do nowadays. So in the Victorian times, a lot of the collectors thought, collect a load of skulls and we'll see if anybody's, changed over time. So we've got these libraries they are libraries of people in various museums around the world where we can see what's been going on over the last few hundred years, which is absolutely fantastic. In some cases, over a few thousand years, and if you go back far enough in prehistory, you might even be able to get back to hundreds of thousands of years, as I've just shown. And of course, you start with Victorians deciding who's making what tools and how old different things are and how they link up. Well, everything I'm showing you now on screen is us. It's a variation of us, okay? Yes, I know what people are going to say. Hang on a minute, what's the star child doing in there? The skull, which that reconstruction is based on, is still basically us. Now this is where it starts to get really interesting, because you can see that if you bumped into one or two of these guys walking down the street, they wouldn't look like us. They very clearly wouldn't look like us. They would look very different. And there are various Homo sapiens, all those, like I say, some with 3D scans, but looking different, and that's quite important. This is Homo floresiensis. It's, you might have seen it in the news reported, the hobbit people, tiny little people, so when they're fully grown adults, they only grow to about 3'6", 3'8", and they turn up on Flores Island in Indonesia. There you go. That's a modern human, and that's a full-grown adult. So now you've got miniature people, mini people. But you also get the other extremes. You get large people as well, which I'll come to in a minute. Most people will have missed this, but this is now science. I'm not expecting you to read it all, and I'm not asking questions later. The real key to this is what's quoted here. What it begins to suggest is we're looking at here we go, Lord of the Rings type world. So the further back you go, basically, the more weird it gets. Because you get tiny humans, you get big humans, you get different shapes. They look different. The heads are different shapes. They don't even think the same as us. And most crucially with this, is this idea of species. I mean, this, you're going back here, I think, to 1996 or 1994. It goes back quite a long way. But the idea of there being different species of human beings makes perfect sense. You know, the smallest cat in the world will sit in the palm of your hand and it comes out of a jungle. You know, it's a jungle cat. But you cross a lion and a tiger, you get a thing called a liger, and it's bigger than a horse. It's absolutely enormous. So the idea of different sizes of us, it's the same with everything else. You get different sizes of everything else. The only reason something might not be there is because it might be extinct. So maybe there's gaps. But initially, it appears everything came in a range of different sizes. You know, it's not a case of one size fits all. These are some of the ones that we've got from DNA. So where DNA is available, DNA is a modern thing where they're looking at how the building blocks of life affect us. And I'm going to stick an extra one on here for the benefit of the folks here. Giants. Because if there's tiny little versions of us, there's got to be dirty great big versions of us as well. You can't have one without the other, because that's basically how nature works. And you can see you've got some of them here. Neanderthals, they are still in living races. Denisovans, they turn up still in some living races. But then mixed in with those was this mystery race. I think it's called something like E14 or something now. It's European. This was an interesting one, Nazca Paracas. Now we're starting to get into some really, really interesting skulls, because they're not the same shape as us. And then you've got the little tiny one, which I mentioned, and there's a great big one. Now, we haven't got any DNA for giants, because officially we don't have any giants. On the other hand, if we did have some giants, that might help to explain how some of the ancient buildings that we look at were built. Because if you've got a bloke who's like 35 foot tall, and he can pick up, a 10-ton block, it's a no-brainer for building some of these enormous structures that you see in the past. Or as a friend of mine says, I'm not saying it's aliens, but I'm going to say it's not actually, it could very well be us. Okay, that was Georgie, our friend, ancient aliens. That's another story. Okay, so what did they actually believe in the past, especially where we live, in our neck of the woods, because it's quite important. When you're looking at heads, what did the Celts think about heads? Well, there were a lot of them, and they seemed to worship them. They seemed to have a thing about, if you had the head, you owned the person. So essentially, what you're looking at is that the soul of the person, it resides in the head, which makes perfect sense. You know what I mean? You're looking out through your eyes, you're listening through your ears, you get all the smells through your nose, you speak through your mouth. You dream, you think, your consciousness, it all sits in the head. Now, scientifically, we know that's not completely true because it works in conjunction with your heart. But in the past, they didn't know that. So, mostly, if you had the head, you had the person. And these are some examples of that. Absolute belting ones here. If you ever go out partying, anywhere down south, like in southern Britain, watch out, because they tend to put skulls in spikes, okay? That's one from a Roman period pit at St Albans. You've got these down here from Scotland, and they seem to be drilling holes in them and wearing them as talismans up there. And then this is a stone shrine from a Druid sanctuary in France, and they've got these skull display holes in there. This was a practice the Romans really didn't like, because most of the heads ending up on spikes were Roman. So basically the Romans tried to talk them into doing the heads in stone, to remember the ancestors that way, which is a Roman thing, Roman way of doing things. So all these stone heads start turning up, but it's more like the idea of the soul, or if you want to extend it, you could say a spirited place. The consciousness of that place is staring out through the eyes of these depictions, even though they're only in stone. That's a very famous one, that. That's Hereford. There we go. So, yeah, they had this thing about heads. Heads are incredibly important in the past. More so than we might think. That's the head of John the Baptist. So just if you're thinking, you know, maybe it's just a pagan thing, it's not. There's a lot of heads that appear in Christian circles. Like, for example, that chap there, that's the Blessed Gerard who founded the Knights Hospitaller. And they've still got him in a cupboard. So there he is. This is Granny Man's talking skull from the Witchcraft Museum at Boscastle. You'd ask it questions and it would give you answers back. It's probably even creepier than Ouija boards, but that's another story. And then the head that changed over there, the transformed head, that's Oliver Cromwell. So right up to like 1660s, they were cutting off heads, sticking them on spikes and going, hey, we've got you. And they didn't like Cromwell, because Cromwell had previously beheaded a monarch, and that was a big no-no. And eventually they took the head down and buried it. So this idea of the cult of the head, it persists. It persists in the West, you know, into relatively modern times. As I said, Templars, Hospitallers, they were very much into it as well. They had this cult of the head, which is why you get lots of green men and things like that on Templar sites, places like Rustling and what have you. Okay, so this is what they believed. The cult of the head. The person lives in the head, because that's where all the action is. If you've got the person's head, you've got them. They can't pass over into the afterlife because you own them. You literally have them. Stick it on a shelf somewhere, you know. Empty vacant heads became symbolic reminders of how short life is. In fact, we die fairly quickly. The green man or foliate head literally became the representation of all life. It was the soul, if you like, of the planet. You know, the fact everything dies in winter, but hail, it's back again in the spring. And basically we exist in our heads. I mean, we still say that. We still say the eyes are the mirror of the soul. We're very surprised if any of you are watching me now from your elbow. You know, it's all going in through the windows at the front. So once you know that, it kind of gives you a different view of the head, especially in the past, and how they looked upon the head. It makes the sort of the brain super important, really important to those cultures. Okay, moving swiftly on. I know you've all had your lunch, but hey, brain surgery. Here we go. In the past, going back into the distant past, going back into the prehistoric past, they knew how to drill holes and cut holes into skulls, mostly using flint. They could do it using flint tools. And you can see from the picture that's just come up, this guy actually had it done several times, and he survived, because there's regrowth. So the idea that all of a sudden if you damage your brain it's good night Vienna, it's not completely true. You know, you can do an awful lot with what's inside your head. But we're not encouraged to do it, obviously. But, you know, there's more to it. Prehistoric brain surgery, look at this. Absolutely everywhere, okay? So if you were going down the Atlantean technology route, you could say that one of those technologies that scattered right across planet Earth very early on was exactly what you could do with the human head, with the human brain. It's early known technology. So what I'm going to tell you from this point on, because it does get a little bit deeper, don't worry, it won't, it's not gruesome or anything. Once we start going into this, I'll be teaching you stuff that, they probably knew about 30,000, 40,000 years ago, but has largely been swallowed up by using modern technology. Basically, the seat of the human soul is the brain. That's where you are. You're driving the body almost like the occupant of a car, and that's the ancient view. That's the ancient view of things. So it might change the way that some of you look at where we go from here. Moving on, here we go. So, what about stretched heads? Now, this is a real hot topic. Now, by stretched heads, there are two types of these. I mean, the giant things that we find, mostly now in South America, I'll give you some examples of them. In South America, they've got this interesting view where actually everything in their zodiac revolves around what happens with the head and the face. I mean, people might have noticed that in that Aztec Mayan world calendar, world view, it centres on the head. Now, they have a really big thing about heads, trust me, these guys. The whole idea of chopping heads off and keeping them, used to collecting them. There are thousands, tens of thousands of them in skull racks. So they were very much aware that that's where people existed. Right, I give you, this is a good one. This is one of the very, very few, possibly one of only 2 or 3, 110% authentic crystal skulls. Because a lot of people go around going, well, they're all fakes. You know, they were all made yesterday. Well, this one wasn't, because somewhere between 900 and 1,300 years ago, this white quartz skull was set in the floor of the ballpark at Cobra, which basically is a game of football to the death. That's essentially what they're playing. And that is still there, it's always been there. So there's no argument that they made them, that's for sure. This is a skull rack. They're the heads of the Spaniards. When the Spaniards turned up, they didn't have a clue what horses were in South America, so they cut their heads off and put them on the skull racks as well, because they didn't like the Spaniards at all, because the Spaniards were there basically to wipe them out. It's a form of ethnic cleansing. So you can't blame the Aztecs and Mayans for being incredibly upset. And that's what they used to do, because then they literally owned the people, and they owned the horses as well, because they've got their heads. This is for blood, for sacrifice. Again, it's the idea that the life resides in the head. This is a nice one. That's Olmec, that's very early, so you're going all the way back, way back into the BC period of South America. Oh, look at the size of that head. Now, in archaeology, they're very naughty, because they usually show you the angle, the photograph that they want you to see. So if you look at all the Egyptian photographs, and like this photograph and 1 or 2 others, you get this wonderful headshot, but they never show it you side on. You never get to see it side on. Some of the heads and the shapes of heads are quite stunning. This is a really good example. That's what you get normally. There he is. Let's call him Bob. That's Bob the Aztec, and he's stood there and he's going, yeah, hey, wonderful. So you actually have a look at him side on and you think, oh, hang on a minute. Whoa, look at the size of that head. Well, the amazing thing is, that's what shape his head was. Now, the idea that it's done artificially and that it's just a stretched head, it doesn't hold water archaeologically, because in the burial grounds of the Nazca and Paracas in Peru, these guys, these little kids, children, they haven't had the time to have the skulls stretched. And these huge heads include babies, include newborns. So, they're not artificially stretched, they are genetically this shape. There's a stonker coming straight out the ground. Now, these do turn up more than you would know. They do turn up a lot, all over the world. So I'm going to give you some examples. Let's give you some examples. These are some of the more famous kind of Nazca Paracas shaped ones. You'll have seen these in the Eric von Daniken books, and also Trepanning. There it is, they're doing brain surgery on that chap. That's Peru. Okay, they're pretty big. And they come in different shapes and sizes. I mean, a lot of these are bigger than you would expect. Already 1 or 2 people are looking at these thinking, hang on a minute, where's the sutures? Where's the lines that you get in normal skulls? That's one of the genetic markers, that this is, in fact, genetic. There are no sutures. They don't develop the same way that we do. That's an artificially stretched skull from the 1930s. That's a baby. That's a naturally shaped skull. So straight away, you're looking at this and you're thinking, okay, why is she doing that? Now, I've been to South America and I met the Mayans, and the law over there now says that you're not allowed to do this, but trust me, they're still doing it. And I wanted to know why, and they said, well, there's a reason. These guys are basically superhuman, and what they're trying to do here is reproduce those superhuman traits. Okay, so you've got genetically and natural, genetically natural, and then you've got artificial. And they're basically copying what is essentially an extinct race. It's a real shame, because these blokes only died out about 400 or 500 years ago. They died from illnesses that were brought over by the Spanish. So I would have loved to have sat down and had a chat with one of them. They would have told us a thing or two, for sure. Okay, let's just take a bit of a leap. Let's go and have a look at what's going on in Egypt. This one's a real shocker. You'll love this. That's Tutankhamun. Yeah, he's a bit bigger. That's his sister. There's Tutankhamun when he started skin on. And that's another one of his sisters. And that's another one of his relatives there. It's the family of Akhenaten. Oh, some of these are huge. Look at this. Clearly they are of that particular genetic race. So when you see depictions like this, you know, hundreds of years the archaeologists have been saying, oh, it's just an art style, you know, it's Amarna style. No, it's not. That's what they actually look like. You know, it's a depiction of real life. So that's the Egyptians. Okay, let's take another leap. Let's go and have a look at, I think this is the Huns in Russia. It's a completely different part of the world again. This is a fairly recent excavation for a roadway that's been put through. I think this one's just outside Moscow. They started excavating. There's quite a few graves, but this one's a really nice one. You probably won't have seen any of these photographs, but it's a lady, and she's got the enormous genetic skull. Now, apparently, these Hunnic ladies were traded into Europe in the medieval period. So, you know, you can imagine it, can't you? There's Richard the Lionheart, you know, down in London, you know, eating his butties, and one of these ladies walks past with these enormous heads. Because they were really valuable, they were capable of doing things ordinary people weren't capable of doing, which I'll come to in a moment. So, of course, that means we have them over here. Well, archaeologists do know that they do turn up. They do turn up over here, these strange elongated heads. There's a great case, I mean, I can't find any photos because they threw all the skulls down a well because they were terrified, but in Victorian times they had 16 of these skulls off the Gop in North Wales, and some of them were quite extreme, but like I say, they all got dumped down a well. But this is a recent one, Caithness, Scotland, up there we go. And this is nice, I quite like this story. This is the skull of a lady they're now calling Ava. Now, because we've got this, and we've also got DNA, this is Iron Age, you can tell what she looked like. There she is, that's Ava. And this isn't the same as it should be. You can see it's distinctly different. Now, she was buried like a princess, you know, prehistoric burial, about 4,000 years ago. They buried her like a princess. So it's thought that she was exceptional. She had exceptional abilities. That's in Scotland, something up the road. So these are some of the locations. There we go. Well, basically, by the time you finish, you know, I mentioned Atlantean scattered technology. These guys are everywhere. They're all over planet Earth. They're not just limited to one location. You're getting these natural DNA enlarged heads all over the place. They're absolutely everywhere. Okay, moving swiftly on. The question then, and this is an obvious question, because I know you're all intelligent here. If you've got a bigger skull, you must have a bigger brain. And I love this idea. Can you imagine some guy walking in with one of those enormous Peruvian skulls, and his brain is 3 times bigger than ours? Immediately, 3 times bigger. So then, when I was writing the book, I thought, what on earth are the consequences of having a bigger brain? So I thought, well, what is a brain? How does a brain work? Do we actually need a solid brain? You know, do we need to actually have the old grey matter, as it used to be called? Well, actually, the answer, rather surprisingly, is we don't. Because with scanning technology and with autopsies and things like that that have taken place scientifically in the last sort of 30, 40, 50 years, there's a few people that don't have any brains, but they're still alive. They still live the same as us. And it's fluid, nearly always it's fluid, that carries the electric charges that are normally carried by the old grey matter. Now, I always tell the same story. I had a mate, I went over to Sheffield, and I had a mate over there who was a sculptor. It was a lady, and she had a boyfriend who was one of these liquid brains. There were only 3 of them known in the country. And his party trick was to get hold of a torch, stick it on the side of his head, and the beam would come out the other side. It's amazing to see, because what was in between was liquid. You know, it's just crackers, absolutely crackers. So what I'm giving you here, these are American examples, because I don't want to personalise it to anyone in particular. But there's lots of people that suffer this. Sometimes it's hydrocephalus, which is this fluid. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes the brain is actually different. If you Google the boy with no brain, they did a documentary on him. And when he was born, he only had 3% brain matter. And he's now grown up. He's a British example. He's grown up. He's got 90% solid brain now. It just solidified. But it didn't seem to bother him. You know, it was just slushing around in there, I guess. So the brain is incredible. You know, it can swell to fill whatever space is available. It's an incredible thing. And with the technology we've got now, you know, we can look at these things in different ways. You know, you don't shake them. And we've got them. We've got brains. That one, by the way, that's Einstein's. That's what Einstein's brain currently looks like. And apparently he was different. He did have genetically different qualities in his brain that enabled him to be able to do the calculations he did. Back to what I said at the beginning, that's a normal sized brain. Well, imagine if somebody has one of them big skulls and they've got 3 Einsteins inside the head. You know what I mean? I mean, it's fabulous when you think about it, because we're looking at things like the pyramids and stuff like that, and we're going, oh, it's got to be aliens. Must be aliens, because none of us can do it. So you walk into a room in Egypt, and there's 10 of these blokes with these enormous heads, and you walk in and you go, how do I build a pyramid? Oh, just give us a minute, you know, bit of papyrus, you know, and just do the maths right. There you go. Go build your pyramid. Because these guys are walking computers. They're literally walking biological computers. Incredible. And like you say, we've got the technology now. We can look at the brain when it's operating. So we know how it works. We can scan it. We can slice it. We can remodel it. We can do it in 3D. I'm dying for somebody to try and do this on one of the Nazca skulls. That's just going to pop everybody's head, literally. But yes, we know what our brain is, we know what it does, and we know how it functions. We're getting to know more and more about it. I won't go into too much of the technical side of it, because you have to go and dash and buy the book, but we'll be here all day if I do that. So hopefully, if this thing moves, don't jam, keep going, keep going. There we go. As I say, we know what it does, but you can look at these different bits, and eventually, you know, through the wonders of technology, you can translate that into how it actually works. So that then starts to get really interesting. What happens if you make these different bits bigger? Especially the bit at the back. You're going to love this. Where you've got like psychic abilities, precognition, you know, the ability to travel in time and space maybe and see things, you know. All those weird abilities, the ability to commune with the divine. You know, if you made that 3 times bigger, where would that put you? You know, where would that take you? Absolutely incredible. Memories, you know. These guys would probably live longer because they were cleverer. But if you had a couple of them a century, but they had this kind of computing capacity, all of a sudden history doesn't become a problem. You could get thousands of years of history down through the generations just by memory. Like I said, I would love to have sat down and chatted to some of these fellas. Okay, so yeah, generally the whole brain gets bigger, but particularly affected at the rear of the brain, because that's the one that is biggest of the lot. Skill, movement, sight, touch, verbal communication, memory, senses and interpretation. You imagine trying to sneak up on one of these fellas, you know you were coming a mile off. It's all survival skills. However, large areas, like I say, including psychic abilities, precognition, and our ability to commune with the divine, we still do not understand completely what the back part of the brain is capable of doing. So honestly, you know, it could be literally mind-boggling what these fellas are capable of doing. I keep talking about computers. There it is. That's your neural net. We've all got one. That's all the little tiny bits of communication inside the brain that carry the data from one place to another. And it's real. It does exist. Our brains are biological supercomputers. That's what they are. Isn't it fabulous because everyone's got one? I'm staring out there now in a room full of supercomputers. It's phenomenal. Forget these little guys here. So that's basically what we are. Yeah, somebody got it. Bit of an old joke, that. I'm having 2 brains. Never mind. Okay. It starts to get really interesting now. What about these fellas? Why on earth did these people in the past bother to make heads out of quartz silica, because that's what it is. Crystal, you know, especially quartz, it's just quartz silica. That's what it is, it's a lump of crystal. And it's everywhere. It's the number one most common substance on planet Earth, quartz. It's absolutely everywhere. It comes in a range of different colours and a range of different shapes and all the rest of it. But basically, at the end of the day, it's all about quartz. And there's a reason for that, which we're going to come to in a moment. That's me with a big lump of quartz. That's on a beach in Wales. That's when I still have some hair. If you go to Chatsworth House, they've got this one, which is huge, basically. That's an enormous lump of quartz. The biggest quartz geode, which is this one, I think I'm right in saying is in Spain, the Geode Gigantica, I think it is. And you can get a couple of blokes sat in there with a cup of tea quite comfortably. That's an enormous amount of quartz. Here we are. Did I get it right? Is it in Spain? I think it is. Anyway, there it is. It's huge. You just crawl into one end and voila, you're inside it. But it's not the biggest concentration of silica. The biggest concentration of silica on the planet is actually in South America, okay? Oh, that's Spain. There you go. I thought it was out that way somewhere. That one's in Spain. No. Your biggest concentration of silica actually is this one. It's not the stage set from Superman. It's not Jarell's lab. This is a cave that they're trying to keep the location secret. It was only open for 6 months. It's in South America and it's breathtaking. The reason they want to keep it closed is so it doesn't get polluted. That's why these guys are wearing, you know, space suits, because they just don't want this thing destroyed. And this is in the body of the Earth, you know, you're hundreds of feet, you know. Sorry, it's Mexico, Mexico. Gave the giant crystals. And this quartz was formed when the Earth formed in that first, you know, boom, boom. So we're back to where we came in, we're back at the start, where I opened at the beginning. Now, there's a good thing going on here. And it's this. Because of the way that the Earth operates, they wanted to try and find out what the Earth is. Okay, they have this thing called Olson's paradox. If you have an iron core and you model that in a computer, the planet doesn't work. Okay, absolutely doesn't work. So this little newspaper article that they slipped in, which most people missed, they decided they were going to model it with quartz silica. You know where this is going, don't you? Guess what? They bang quartz in as the core of the planet, and it works perfectly, works fine. So what we are, is we're flying through space on a giant crystal ball. That's basically what it is. They can be even more specific than that. They actually think the core is made of amethyst. But it's quartz silica, that's what it is. Well, that explains why we've got so much of it knocking around. You know, it's everywhere. It's in microchips, it's in the windows. You know, it's in the sand, in the concrete that makes this building. It's in the glass that's on the bar at the back there. It's literally everywhere. The folks looking at me now through glasses that are made of quartz silica. You know, it's literally the planet. We are basically carbon-based life forms living in a quartz silica world. That's how it works. Back to South America again. So you're back to these guys with the socking great big heads, you know, and what did they know? This is the world's biggest hedge. I know they call it a jungle, so Yucatan Peninsula is a jungle, but it's not more than about 30 foot tall. Levanten, Belize, 1924. Some of you will know where this is going. There's an archaeologist out there called Mitchell Hedges, and it's his daughter's 14th birthday. She's a bit of a pest, so he says, right, clear off, go on, Anna, clear off into the woods and see what you can find. So she goes rummaging through all of these temple ruins, which as you can see I've been rummaging through. She goes into one, and there's still the altar there, and under the altar she comes up with the world famous Mitchell Hedges Skull of Doom, which is the first crystal skull really to hit the headlines, okay? And the reason I put this in, because everyone's, you know, going, isn't it? Is it real? Is it not real? You know, what is it? The reason I put this one in is at the end of the day, it's the only crystal skull that you cannot find any manufacturing marks on. They've had it under an electron microscope. Now, that's Mitchell Hedges. Now, as you can see, he likes a joke. Not. I mean, he's not the kind of guy to do anything for amusement value, believe me. Anna stuck to the story right to her dying day. She only died in 2007. And this beautiful crystal skull has a separate, anatomically correct jawbone. So there's loads of reasons to believe, there's Anna, that this one actually is real. So I'm going to put that up as real skull number 2. There is a third one. There's a tiny hand-sized one that was found recently on a burial outside Mexico City. That's so new, in fact, the archaeology's not really been released about that. They don't want you to know where it is, because they don't want treasure hunters. But they're getting, in Mexico now, these real ones, South America, Mexico, North America as well, anything to do with crystal skulls, if they're real, they're getting really touchy about it. They don't even tell you when they're found, because you know, they're all finding their way across here. That having been said, I've got one in a case down there, so if you want to come and see me at the back later on, you can come and have a handle of it. It's about 400 to 600 years old, and it is an Aztec one. I'll tell you the story later, otherwise we'll never get off this. Okay, the one I've got is that one. It's called Jason. This is what happened in the 1970s when they all came together. They had the Mitchell Hedges skull, all the ancient handmade ones they brought together. So my criteria is, number 1, does it have any provenance? Number 2, is it handmade, not made by machines? Number 3, how highly polished is it? They tried to get rid of the manufacturing marks. Number 4, is it definitely quartz? You know, by the time you start looking at this, the numbers of fakes begin to disappear fairly quickly. They're not going to spend 100 hours trying to dig into some gigantic quartz crystal to make a fake. They just don't bother nowadays. But these things are stunning, absolutely stunning. Okay, now, let's try and tie this up. How does this tie into the fact that the planet is made of quartz silica? And what about the legend that these things can record? What about the idea of quartz recorders? I'm sure you've all heard of that. That somehow data is contained in these skulls, which is why they brought them all together. Oh, here we go, here's a list of the proper ones. These are the ones in the museums. They've all been there for a couple of 100 years. Most of them came through a dealer in Paris called Boban, and he was an importer of South American artifacts. Everything else he ever sold was real, so there's no reason to wonder that these skulls are not also real. I'll put the real one in there as well. So that's the British Museum one. There's a nice story about the British Museum one actually amongst the archaeologists, because they kept losing security staff. They had it in this cabinet, and the staff, the security now were getting creeped out, so they put shutting doors on it. So you can walk in and it'll click, you know, and it's shut away and it's safely out of the way. So these things do things, you know, they do have qualities that you'd expect from quartz. Such as, don't know if anybody knows this, anybody got a quartz wristwatch? You crush a quartz crystal and it'll pulse back, okay? There's energy, there's magnetism, there's stuff going on inside there, electrical charge, which can be photographed using Kirlian photography. So you can actually see it discharging, as quartz crystal discharging, which is why it works as the Earth's core, because it has the same qualities in microcosms as the Earth. That's the crystal being disclosed inside a watch, and it pulses with such accuracy that they use them in military watches, because you need the best. So if you've got one of these fellas, well, you probably haven't got one of those fellas, but if you've got a quartz watch, that little bit of sort of quartz there, that's doing the business. That's the business end. It's got other qualities as well. And the ancients knew of some of these, so they're not new, apart from the electrical discharge. This is good. This is something that was found in this country. You probably might know about this, or you might not know about this. You can write on a glass disc using 5D laser technology. So you can actually put data into quartz silica. 360 terabytes to survive up to 14 billion years. They reckon one of these little discs could hold everything that we know about everything that we know. It would hold all of our books on one of these. It costs a bomb for the stuff to read it, you know, the actual technology, but they know it can be done, which then raises the question, you know, what is actually trapped in quartz? The only thing that's holding us back is we don't know how to read it. You know, we've got the crystals, but we don't have the technology to read them. Here's a couple of other qualities. Did they have this in ancient times? Yes, they did. Crystal son, Robert Temple, he looks at all the lenses that have turned up and various other things on archaeological sites. So the idea that, you know, they couldn't possibly do this jewellery because they couldn't see what they were doing, that's nonsense. Everything from the Vikings going backwards, they had a pretty good idea of how to produce lenses. Okay, there's some of the equations from the past. Magnifying glasses, telescopes, glasses, crystal balls. Crystal balls are interesting actually, the ones that we find in Europe, because you've got these polished, clear quartz balls. They're actually firelighters. You know, you used to sit in the playground as kids with magnifying glasses, setting fire to things. That's basically what these things do. Then you've got piezoelectricity, which is created by pressure, it's pulse using watches. Viking sunstones are interesting because they'd show you where the sun was, even though you couldn't see it, because they focus the pinpricks of light. You bang a couple of white stones together, you can try this next time you're on the beach in Wales, you'll get blue flashes coming out. We don't even know what to do with that, because that's triboluminescent light. That's separation of electrons, so I think they just used it for fun. These are some of the stones that produce heat spots. So they're quartz combined with light produces heat, which is what it does. That's just one of the ancient uses. It's not that old, it's only like 1,000 years ago they were doing that. Then you've got flint. Now flint, believe it or not, is a form of quartz. So it's quartz silica again, and it's sparked with steel to start a fire. It's used in the pottery industry. And if you get a flint blade, it cuts at a molecular level. So they're actually using them now for surgical blades and gun flints. Obsidian in particular, amazing, absolutely amazingly sharp stuff, ceremonial to the Aztecs. And then of course glass, I mentioned glass, it's everywhere, you can't escape it, you know. It's all the same stuff, it's all quartz silica, look at that, that's a flint. No, it's not flint, I don't know what you'd call it. It's a quartz crystal dagger, okay, you'll find that on the internet. It's out there, it comes from France, I think I'm right in saying. This is interesting, of course you knew about glass, that's a lightning strike on a beach. That's what happens when lightning hits a beach, it goes boom. Next minute, whoop, up comes glass. You've got these glass shapes. So you can do that as well, you can have natural electricity combined with sand produces glass, which of course they could remelt, and that's how the ancients discovered that you can make glass out of sand. So what does it mean? What happens when you put all of this together? Well, it's quite important, okay? Wait until I round it up, you'll like this. I am sort of on the home run here, so I'm glad you stayed awake. Everything that involves life on Earth, absolutely everything you can imagine, that's in us, that's on the planet, that's in everything else, is embodied somewhere in this idea of quartz, okay? So how does that feed into the human head? Well, actually it does. This is the interesting bit. When it comes up, ta-da! That's us. It's everybody in this room. That's what we're made of, okay? That's roughly what we're made of. So where's quartz silica on this? Where does quartz silica feature in this list? Well, interestingly, we contain all of the elements that you find in quartz silica, okay? You get all of it. And you get all of the elements you find in the planet. There's even a flash of light. You can get light involved when we're conceived, which they've managed to photograph now. We get a little bit lighter when we die, nobody knows why. Look at this. We contain a tiny percentage of silica, the deficiency of which results in weak bones and ta-da! Light bulb comes on, crystal heads. If you don't have the silica, you end up with a damaged brain, if you've not got enough silica. Next question, how the hell did they know that thousands of years ago? Okay, that's really opened up the floodgates. That's the link, that's where it comes in with the crystal skulls. I'll show you this, I like this. This is a conception flash. There's a little guy, you know, tunneling in, doing his best. Hey, let's get in here. Okay, as soon as he gets in, there you go, fireworks, firework display. They've discovered as well now, the brighter the flash, the stronger the human being resulting, the stronger the embryo is afterwards. You can see him tumbling in there, but that is actually the flash. So all of us, we came in a flash of light. Absolutely incredible. So what story does this give us? Okay, everything can be found somewhere in us. We are made up of everything, okay? Parts of the human body are not solid, not necessarily the bits we think of being solid, sometimes they're not. We were a far more diverse and gifted species in the past than we are now, and it's decreasing. I don't know if there's anybody here who's a fan of evolution, but it's not really supported by the evidence. If anything, we're devolving. We're getting less and less and less and less. And we're no closer now to proving where we come from than we were at the beginning. Yeah, we photographed the flash, but nobody has a clue. Nobody has a clue where we're coming from. So it's an interesting, very interesting journey that it's taken through the crystal skulls of human heads. There's a little tiny little bit at the end here, if I remember right. What about these fellas? Well, it is the weird weekend, and I couldn't leave them out. Can't do this and not talk about aliens, dearie me. I'm on the next series, by the way, of Ancient Aliens, when it eventually comes out. I'm doing obelisks and crop circles for them. So what about this? Well, when I did the book, and I actually did the book, Crystal Skulls of Human Heads, I got to the end of it and I thought, blow me down, they must have done the same research. There's Spielberg with millions of dollars, you know what I mean? And he's come up with the same thing I came up with on my own, you know, in the book. The idea, these concepts that he's got within that movie, yes, he's made a big fantasy out of it, and yes, a lot of it's fiction, but some of it isn't. You know, there is a factual side to the research he did. And the truth of the matter is that every atom in your body came from a star that exploded. The atoms in your left hand that probably came from a different star than the one in your right, and it really is the most poetic thing to know about physics. We're all stardust, every single one of us. All of us are part of that universe that we started off with right at the very beginning. So, life is everywhere. It's even in the universe. I love this. You go all the way to outer space, and what do you find in outer space? You find a slug. You think you've got problems with your garden, you know, your lettuce. But there's slugs flying around out in space. There's this strange looking thing, it's this sphere, titanium sphere, but it's chucking out organic matter. That's up in the upper atmosphere. This one, I love this one best of all. In fact, you can even say hello to them next time you walk past an electrical appliance. This is a electron-eating bacteria that lives in electricity. So, in all the wires here and everything, you know what I mean, everything that's going on here, there's this bacteria living in that as well. So there's life literally everywhere, absolutely literally everywhere. And we are a part of it. We should really rejoice that. It's an incredible, it's a tiny little book I wrote, but it's ended up becoming an enormous vision for, where we are in the cosmos, where we are in the universe. So, in conclusion, while there remains no apparent hard evidence of alien intervention here on Earth, we may say with absolute certainty that we are made from the material, the same material as the cosmos, which again then leads to really only one conclusion. There's only one end to this, which comes up just after this. I'm on form today because I'm running ahead of the PowerPoint. That doesn't happen very often. Maybe, just maybe, we are the creators, we're the humans, we are the ancient, and we are the aliens. Okay? Maybe, just maybe. Well, I hope I've managed to keep you all awake after lunch. I hope nobody's nodded off. I didn't hear the thud of heads hitting the floor. Nobody's snoring yet. So I'm glad you managed to survive all that. I am going to dig out my crystal skull. I'll be sat over there at the back somewhere with it as soon as this concludes. Do we do questions and answers? Feel like we should? We could do, couldn't we? There you go, light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Thank you very much.